Hey guys, Drifter here. The Call of Duty community is reeling right now from an explosive lawsuit brought against Activision from Optic, Hex, and Scump. That's the crazy part. Hex and Scump are two of the biggest figures in not just the Call of Duty community, but the esports community, and they're suing Activision, alleging that the company violated state and federal law by creating a monopolistic league, and then they use that monopoly to force Hex to sell part of his company, to take some of Scump's sponsorship money, to fine him for playing different games, and fix prices for players below living standards. It's a really spicy lawsuit. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over to this massive document that you see before you. This is the lawsuit that the two of them have filed, which is the complaint. And we are going to try to break this down in a logical way and go over the claims and kind of explain what's going on in this absolute monster here. We're going to have COD gameplay, but we'll come back to this as is relevant. And this isn't designed to be a video that paints Activision as evil or Hex as greedy or who's right and who's wrong. It's just I've seen a lot of people in the community aren't super familiar with legal documents, so we're going to try to break that down today. All right. So first off, this document is known as a complaint, which is what the plaintiffs, or the people claiming that they have been damaged, bring to the court to force Activision to come to the table and be held accountable for it. That's how most lawsuits start. And things listed in complaints are not done. They are not factually true. They are just allegations until the court decides. But you can enter evidence into your complaints, and there's some of this that we can go through. So it's important to keep in mind that everything that we're going to talk about from this point forward is allegedly, or almost everything. The Department of Justice did settle one part of this itself, but almost everything here is going to be allegedly, so in case I forget to say it, please keep that in mind. So let's start off with the nature of action, the first page of the document. It has a really good summary of what's going on here, so I'm going to mostly read this verbatim. It says, this action arises from Activision's unlawful 100% monopoly over professional Call of Duty leagues and tournaments. As a result of its myriad of anti-competitive actions, Activision now holds an unlawful monopoly power to prevent would-be competitors from entering the market, as well as to coerce the market's other participants, in particular professional Call of Duty players and team owners, to acquiesce and extortionate financial terms. Wow. That is a very spicy claim right there. And it moves on the very same page, citing, and this is a real court case, you can look it up, the Department of Justice recently concluded that with respect to the professional Call of Duty market, Activision engaged in per se violations of Section 1 of the Sherman Act that were intended to and did inflict economic injury onto professional Call of Duty players such as Seth Abner or Scump, and they cited United States versus Activision Blizzard. This case was just recently closed, and wow, that's really rough. And in case you're unfamiliar, the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 is sort of the standard, oldest, most commonly referred to antitrust or anti-monopoly law that we have on the market. But these claims keep on going. It says the lawsuit seeks civil damages arising from that, and the Department of Justice has found violations of the Cartwright Act and Illinois' Antitrust Act that were not within the scope of the Department of Justice's investigation and enforcement action. So the Cartwright Act and Illinois' Antitrust Act are state laws in California and Illinois, respectively, which is where the Activision is located and where I believe Hex's company is located. And they're very similar to the federal one. You'll see this a lot, that states have state laws very similar to the federal laws, so you can violate multiple at the same time. Moving along, I did find a funny section of this lawsuit where they try to describe how successful Optic is and how big of a brand it is and how, cool Scump is. And you kind of build yourself up so you can show the injury later. But there is this really funny line here that says the Optic team has earned tens of millions of dollars in endorsement and sponsorship deals, trademark merchandise sales, streaming revenue, and prize money. Professional Call of Duty is essentially the esport equivalent of professional football. And I hate to tell you guys that is absolutely untrue. That League of Legends is the football of esports, okay? Maybe Valorant, not Call of Duty. That is a very weird thing to put in a lawsuit, and if I were Hex, I'd be talking to my lawyer about that one. The next part of the lawsuit is part of the complaint where they claim all the things that Activision did and what rules they violated and how they hurt people. And one of the interesting sections I found was on page 4, line number 20, and it says Activision League is a closed league that Activision capped at 12 permanent teams, with each team connected to a city. In this regard, Activision modeled the COD League after the National Football League, NBA, MLB, etc., etc. It says, however, the COD League was not the result of a collective bargaining agreement between players and owners. Activision imposed the model onto prospective owners, and indeed players, including Seth Abner, were forced to agree to lengthy Activision official rules and terms of conditions of the Call of Duty League, the rules, while at a photo shoot without adequate time to review despite requesting counsel and under the threat of being excluded from the COD League absent immediate acquiescence to its terms and contract. So basically, Scump is claiming that Activision rolled up to a photo shoot and said, you need to sign this right now or you're out. And there are there's some evidence of that we'll go over later. Moving along. So if that claim was true, that's probably illegal. Most states, most countries, at least places built on English common law, say that contracts signed under duress, under threats, without ability to read, if the person is illiterate or drunk or incapacitated, or they were not allowed to review, are typically considered invalid. And pressuring somebody in this way typically meets that bar, but that's going to be for the courts to decide and not for me. So moving along on page number 5 of the complaint, line number 1, it says, as another critical distinction between the Activision COD League and traditional sports leagues, Activision's copyright over the Call of Duty game provides Activision control over the essential facility of any professional Call of Duty competition, the game itself. And I think that this is going to be the crux of Activision's court argument, and probably even the crux of H3cz and Scump's criticism against them, is that, unlike football, Call of Duty is owned by Activision. To the best of my knowledge, nobody has a patent or copyright on football or basketball. You can just go play those things. Those are games that exist, right? Well, Activision owns the Call of Duty brand. It owns the game, the servers, the artwork, the license, all of the intellectual property. You can't play Call of Duty without Activision's permission in any capacity. So of course they want to have a monopoly on the league, and they apparently, according to H3cz's claim, want to monopolize the downstream competitive Call of Duty market. And this is very, very different than football. And even though it paints Activision as a bad guy, it might be a decent legal defense to say that, hey, this is our IP and we can do whatever we want with it. There's an interesting bit on page 6, starting at line number 3, where they talk about Activision's new Overwatch League as a massive success. Basically, they're claiming that Activision was able to convince billionaires to buy teams in the league, and then told people that it was very, very successful and it was making a bunch of money and it was going to be great and hype. And that was completely untrue. We all know that it collapsed. We've seen the history. But they got New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft to agree to pay Activision $240 million in order to join the Overwatch League. I bet that didn't really work out well for him. But the same kind of anti-competitive story actually played out with respect to the Call of Duty League, but a little bit worse for Optic Hex in this one, as he claims. The complaint says that Activision coerced 12 teams to pay them a $27.5 million entry fee for the privilege of being one of the 12 teams allowed to participate in the COD League. They were also required to give Activision an unconditional 50% share of revenue the team generated from ticket sales, sponsorships, and other revenue streams. Then they were required to cede to Activision the exclusive right to contract with the most lucrative Call of Duty sponsors, such as energy drink companies, Monster, Mountain Dew, military companies like US AAA Insurance, cede to Activision the exclusive right to contract with broadcasters, such as cable and streaming networks. We're going to come back to this one later, and refrain from participating or supporting any other professional COD leagues. They also prohibited the team's players from engaging in any commercialized COD gameplay, such as streaming informal friendlies on YouTube or Twitch, outside of the league, and basically said it prevented the players from earning any money from this. My opinion is that's an absolutely absurd amount of demands and payout that you have to go through in order to even participate in the league, which is why H3cz and Scump are alleging that's violation of federal and state law, that it's too monopolistic and violates the Cartwright Act. I couldn't imagine giving up sponsors, giving up my revenue, paying a ton of money, having to share an unconditional 50% of my revenue with Activision after spending $30 million. To me, that sounds insane. From Activision's perspective, corporate speak, sounds fantastic. You own the thing, you own the venue, you own the people, you own the owner, you own everything, and you get all the money from it. Like, from a corporate perspective, that's great. Somebody in the office is probably high-fiving each other about how much they're going to earn on this. Next, let's talk about a section on page 8, starting at line 17. It says, plaintiff Seth Abner, that's Scump, was similarly restrained as a player on an Activision COD League team. Even after players such as Scump retired from the Activision COD League, Activision used its monopoly power to prevent these former players from accepting vast categories of revenue relating to professional Call of Duty. So even though Scump is not an active player, he's still being bound by Call of Duty contracts, which to me, again, sounds very, very, very bizarre. Just after that, on the same page, Hex claims that he was forced to sell his brand and company because Activision would not allow him to be the sole owner of a team. Even if he put up the $27 million himself, he could not be the sole owner. So in late 2021, Activision forced Rodriguez to partner with wealthy investors that Activision preferred, billionaire friends of the company. And the Activision says, namely billionaire investors that were connected to a traditional sports franchise. As a condition of partnering with Rodriguez, these billionaire investors demanded that he grant them a 92.5% ownership in his company, which is basically the whole thing, known as Optic IP LLC. And that asset has a valuation of about $100 million. And Hex goes on to say that he was forced to sell this for somewhere, don't super quote me on this in the document, about $20 million. So he was forced to sell almost all of his entire company under value in order to be in the league, and I don't know if that's before or after the $27 million buy-in. I don't know how legal that is, but that seems really, really bad. Okay, after this, that's most of the complaints here. They got blocked out of sponsors. They were being controlled after retiring. They were forced to sell their company. The fees were high. They were being lied to about the success. But there are other things in this document that I still find interesting. So we're going to skip all the way down to page 22. There's a paragraph here that explains why Call of Duty went YouTube exclusive. So they streamed on Twitch for a long time, and you might remember a time they were YouTube exclusive. And it said that this hurt team owners because it cut them out of negotiating with YouTube, Facebook, ESPN, traditional broadcast, and instead forced everybody to do everything on YouTube Live, which Activision set up, allegedly, a partnership. Where is it? Activision granted the exclusive broadcasting rights to YouTube in exchange for price concessions from Google with respect to Google Cloud services that Activision uses for its video game platforms. So they did a bro deal, YouTube exclusivity for lower cloud services, which Hex and Scump claims damaged their ability to earn and negotiate with other broadcast entities. The next section talks about the team participation agreement, and they say they were coerced into signing or they basically get kicked out. And it says in section B of that, provisions prohibiting teams and players from accepting any direct or indirect compensation from any publisher, producer, owner, or license of a non-Activision or Blizzard game, or from promoting or endorsing any competitor to the Call of Duty League. We have a really funny bit of evidence this later where Scump apparently got fined because he streamed Raid Shadow Legends. It goes on to say that these provisions prevented teams from obtaining sponsorships from companies involved in video game platforms, athletic wear, energy or soft drinks, water, payment services. So, that's like Venmo or Cash App, computer monitors, graphics cards, casinos, military, alcoholic beverages, which are the most lucrative sponsorships, and instead granting Activision the exclusive right to make contact with such sponsors. And it basically that prevents Optic or anybody else from landing any good sponsors or earning any money. There's a revenue sharing pool thing going on, and they talk about provisions prohibiting teams from paying fair market value compensation to their players, including superstars such as Scump and other things that suppressed players' wages. But on this topic, on page 26, included in the document, you can see where Scump says that he was fined for playing Raid Shadow Legends during a sponsored stream. It was during the off season as well, which makes it worse. My channels are my channels. I should be able to do what I please, but apparently I can't. Wow. Wow. Like, okay. I would have never signed a contract like that, but I guess you don't really get to. And oh, here's an explanation of the wage fixing. So what they did in the league's charter is they did a competitive balance tax. And the competitive balance tax is described in this lawsuit as an allegedly unlawful salary cap that prevented players from paying fair market wages and salaries and often suppressed players' wages, including that of Scump. Now, you would think this is the end of the document, but it gets a little bit worse for Activision here. So part of this is that, and you can see this on page 27, I believe it's maybe line number 1. This section basically explains the Department of Justice's involvement in the issue. And the Department of Justice actually sued Activision and brought them to court, saying that Activision had unlawful contact that had the purpose and effect of illegally suppressing players' wages. Now, that was settled with the Department of Justice. I don't think either side lost, but they settled and agreed to changes to this competitive balance tax. Now, when you're suing somebody, and this is pure opinion on my part, and most courts would agree with me, if another higher court has already agreed that the defendant has violated the law, and that law is a financial one, violated the law in a way that obviously, such as suppressing wages, would impact the plaintiff, that is a really bad thing for the defendant, because for Activision to claim that they did not suppress wages would kind of contradict the Department of Justice and their previous agreements, which would be a very, very difficult thing to explain in court. And then finally, near the very bottom of all the interesting parts of the document, the claim of damages, at least for Hex, is about $120 million to the best of my ability to tell, which is just insane to me. So yeah, that's my best attempt at explaining the important parts of this document. I know it was a little bit rambly and a little bit crazy and a little bit long, but I do want to offer you some opinion here at the end of the video. This is a really brutally savage lawsuit that looks bad for Activision. Whether these complaints are true or just allegations, whether they did these things, whether there will be a payout, is not for me or you to decide. This has hit a very high-level court case in California. The feds are involved, judges are involved, millions of dollars of lawyers are involved. It will settle. I believe that Hex and Scump probably want a settlement from Activision. If I had to guess, I would guess that they're looking for less so of an Activision loses the lawsuit and admits that they did something wrong, because that means it goes to trial, that means it drags out, that means it gets appealed. What they probably want, and what most people want in a big lawsuit like this, is a settlement to make it go away. Activision will just find the minimum amount that Hex and Scump will take, settle this, and kind of bury the problem. The problem does become, however, as this lawsuit progresses, it's going to draw attention to the Cartwright Act in California, so California could take enforcement action against Activision similar to the federal government. And I just honestly think that if any of these claims were true, it's incredibly evil of Activision, and respectfully to Hex and Scump, who I know but haven't spoken to in a long time, it seems, at least on the surface, really foolish to agree to contracts like this. Me personally, I would like to think I would not agree to this, period. I just wouldn't participate in the league. But then you have to look at it from their perspective. They're already in the league. They're already doing this. They've already dedicated their life to Call of Duty and to competing. They've built the brand, the company, and suddenly, in minutes, you find out that if you don't agree to this document, you are going to be cut off. That you are just, all that money, all those millions, all that future, that fame, that glory, that just fades away, and you can find yourself banned from competitive Call of Duty just because you didn't want to agree to an arbitrary and questionably legal player provision document. So I haven't been tempted with those millions of dollars and that level of success, so maybe if I were in their shoes, I would make a different decision. But I don't know, this is all just kind of nasty to me. I think I've explained enough of my opinions and how this looks to begin with. I think the Overwatch League was a failure. I personally think the COD League is a failure. A lot of esports are failures. The dumbest thing in this document is calling Call of Duty the equivalent of football. It's not. That is absolutely 1,000,000% League of Legends. Call of Duty's been playing second, third, and fourth fiddle in esports for a very long time. It's just the #1 console esport is the reality of that situation. So yeah, that's all the information I've got. I think that's all the explaining that is needed here. And I'm going to reiterate again, the things that we went over aren't true in the legal sense until this case is over. Activision is going to have defenses. They are going to have lawyers. They are going to poke holes in this. There's going to be depositions. There's going to be evidence. There's going to be a lot going on. So I'm just going to sit back and chill and see how it shakes. All right, guys, that's all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.